It will be my pleasure to invite the Lieutenant General Ellen, retired and former Vice Chief of the Defense Staff of the Canadian Armed Force, to the Fireside chat, and Dr. Stewart, partner at the Deep Venture Fund at the Business and Development Canada, known as BDC.
François, merci à vous. And thank you everybody for coming. The Deep Venture Fund is also a deep tech venture fund, just to clarify. I'm a kid from Kingston, Ontario. It's great to be here, and it's great to welcome all of you here to this beautiful town. I did an engineering physics degree in Toronto, and then an applied physics degree at Stanford, spent 10 years at Hewlett-Packard Labs in the Valley, and then moved back to run the Canadian Security and Disruptive Technology Lab before abandoning it because I got frustrated with exactly what François Pomerleau was talking about, which is the vast quantity of great research that Canada creates. 4 to 4.5% of the world's scientific citations are generated in Canada. We've got about 2.5% of the developed world population. So we're twice as good as most other developed countries at doing science. And we convert that into less than 1% of the world's intellectual property, which is technology, companies, money, and that leads to prosperity for the country. So I think we're at this, as we've tried to outline here, we're at this very, very unusual confluence of trends. One is technology is going faster than ever before, and robotics and AI have converged in a way that most people didn't predict, except for the people in this room. Most people didn't predict even 5 years ago. And the people in this room have the ability to move the needle in an unbelievable way for science, for technology, for the country, and for the world. The second factor converging there is there are obviously some very, very significant changes in geopolitics in the world today. And there are some very significant changes in manufacturing, globalization, reversing globalization, where that manufacturing is happening, and of course, in the security fabric of the world. So this is a conversation with Lieutenant General Francis Allen, retired, about how robotics is converging with our need for security in the world and what roles Canada could play there. What is the intersection between autonomous systems, robotics, and defense? Why is that something that we need to talk about instead of saying we don't want to do it? And how do we develop that in a way that generates the strongest economic benefits for the country and also keeps the country secure? So, Lieutenant General Francis Allen, it's a real pleasure to welcome you to the stage. If you can't read, it's in the program right here.
I think they can all read.
I don't know, I'm just going to read it for them. Lieutenant General Francis Allen retired after 41 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. Most people quit much sooner than that. She's no stranger to mathematics, or to engineering, or to especially communication systems. And her final posting was as Vice Chief of Defense Staff. That means number 2 in the Canadian Armed Forces. So, Lieutenant General Allen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Duncan. I really appreciate it. Certainly, while I was the Vice Chief of Defense and number 2 in the Canadian Armed Forces, I think one of the more critical roles that the Vice Chief of Defense plays is looking to ensure that we are acquiring the right balance of capabilities that the military needs to not just deliver on military activities of today, but also those of the future. And thinking of what the future holds and what the future could hold is probably more art than science. It is done clearly with science as an incredible part of that, but it is actually trying to what if through different types of scenarios and what might happen. And so working with the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, CANSOFCON, Cyber Command space, which is part of the Air Force, to take a look at where are the capabilities that we think that we will need to operate today and to operate into the future, and then allocating the resources that we have towards those capabilities really has been what my work was for the last 3 years just before I retired, as well as doing it in the cyber domain when I was doing force development for cyber. So why am I here? Is maybe a good question.
Yeah. I want to know why I want to make this a little personal. And for somebody that served their country more than 41 years, I want to know, why are you here today? What is it about this group of people that brought you to Kingston? And how do you think about robotics and autonomous systems as part of, obviously, the security mix of the country?
Yeah, so I guess I am here today because I have lived in a career of 41 years, sort of an experience of, funding defense a little bit. And I say a little bit, we fund it inconsistently over my 41 years as a career. And when you fund something inconsistently, you get the results that you think that you're going to get out of it. And so when I take a look at the world, when I take a look at the commitments the government has made to actually address the geopolitical situations that we have, to create stability so that we have the international order and the trade agreements that allow nations to flourish, I'm a big proponent of trying to help to create the environment that will let that take place so that the military can actually acquire, learn from industry, and produce and defend our Canada, its allies, and our values around the world. And so robotics has quite a long but small history in defense. Certainly, I think, everyone for years and years and years was familiar with robotics from the concept of, mine control and EOD and UXO removal and those types of, remotely controlled robot functions that were a part of what the military probably looks at as at least two reasons why robotics is important. And one is because if you can reduce risk to personnel, you should do so. And if you can reduce risk to personnel, you can actually have greater success in your operations moving forward. And so surveillance, patrol, things that are heavily intensive in time and in people, robotics, if you take a look at either UAVs or other types of surveillance robotics with sensors that can feed information back, that can move as it is either controlled or as it interprets its environment around it, creating that persistence in a country as large as ours is really quite important, and certainly quite important for the North. And I'd say robotics is also important with respect to either enhancing or replacing human effort and human performance as we go forward. And that certainly can be around all the things that were talked about from a dual-use perspective in the panel this morning with respect to warehousing and delivery and those types of things. It can be exoskeleton suits to enable people to lift and carry and be heavy and strong in unpredictable environments. All of those things are I think would say areas of interest for us, as well as obviously if we take a look at Ukraine in the last while and what we've seen the impacts of drone technologies on warfare itself. The one thing I think I also want to talk about a little bit, Duncan, is that from a military perspective, we also have to think of both operational and defense, or offensive and defensive implications associated with any technology. So as you've seen in Ukraine with respect to drone technologies, the life cycle of certain types of capabilities, be it from the delivery system to the control systems for the drones and the payloads that they have, the weapons that they're carrying, there's an evolution cycle that's measured in weeks and not in years. And so thinking about the countering of activities. So if there's a technology that enables something, how do you counter that technology if it could cause you harm? And so thinking about things from both an offensive and a defensive perspective as it pertains to robotics, as it pertains to control systems, is also something that's of great interest to the military. And so sharing those perspectives of, and I'm certainly not the only person in this room who can do this with great detail. There are other folks who represent the military operational community amongst us. Those are the types of things that we think about, but we don't necessarily have the depth of knowledge of the expertise that is in this room.
Can I pull on that a little bit?
Yeah.
One of the things so we just heard from you a number of reasons why the robotics and autonomous system space is so important to the future that you see the capability of the military. One of the things that scares a lot of people, and it came up this morning, is robots being used to exert lethal force. And I wondered, you committed your career to being ready to use lethal force when it was required. That is the purpose of the military. Is there something that you could share with us that would help the rest of the community feel, okay, yes, it is okay to be scared of that. Some of us in the military are scared of that as well. Here's how we think about it.
Yeah, so people in the military spend a lot of time thinking about the rules of engagement, as we call them, and respecting, the Geneva Convention, respecting all of the requirements that we have as militaries, or that they have. I've been out for almost a year. I still say we. It's really hard after 41 years not to say we anymore. Really thinking about the rule sets that go around this, that are about what is legal when it comes to the application of force and the circumstances in which it is legal. And so it is the same thought around autonomous weapon systems. How does this relate to targeting? How does this relate to the scale and the size of damage or destruction that you may be doing? Because it needs to be proportional. It needs to be consistent with what it is you're doing. You need to not be targeting civilians as part of this. So all of the thinking around that has to be factored into our thinking around autonomous activity and autonomous weapon systems, and where the people part of that, which is what we are mostly concerned about when it comes to the law of armed conflict and ad jus and ad bellum, the types of law that we have to be thoughtful about as we do this. These factors need to apply in the same way that people in this room are concerned about the values and the ethics associated with their use. We are perhaps just even more concerned and even more stringent in thinking about how those things will be applied, or we need to be.
I know you and I have talked about this, and certainly I've talked with many other members of the military, with the idea that we train like hell to be able to use force if we need to, and we sure as hell hope we never have to use it. Right. Is the main idea that I hear in any of those conversations.
And we train thinking about what is the correct way for me to apply that force, and what is lawful and what is not lawful. An order is not lawful if it asks you to violate the law. So we are focused on that.
Let's go in that direction a little bit. How does the Canadian Armed Forces conceive of its requirements for these future capabilities? And as Vice Chief, you are actually responsible for the future capability design of the entire Armed Forces. So how does the Armed Forces think about conceiving its requirements for these capabilities? How would we help the people in this room understand that a bit?
So maybe I'll draw a distinction and a connection between two activities. One is called exercising, and one is called experimenting and experimentation. And the purpose of exercising is to enhance your readiness, to be good at the things that you are supposed to do, to feel confident in them, to understand the challenge environments that come with them, to help you make your decisions as you're going forward. And so we exercise to be ready for today. We experiment after we have gone through a process of conceiving what is the operational environment of the future, what are the factors that we think will affect the future, what are the technologies that we have today and the ones of the future, what do we think the geopolitical situations of the future possibly could be, what is the military capabilities that we think adversaries and allies will have in the future, and then running scenarios and saying, where does that leave us? What can and cannot we do as a military within that future operating environment? And then take a look at what are those critical capabilities that we really think we probably should have and don't have in our arsenal. What are the technologies and the industry that supports the delivery of those capabilities in the future? Does it exist now? Or is this an area for research and development that really needs to be focused on? And that's where our colleagues in DRDC see the outputs of this wargaming, as we call it, and looking at what those possible future scenarios are, and then take that and look out with academia, with industry, and saying, okay, how can we look at how that can move forward in the future? So that then needs to turn into experimentation. Then we need to try things, and we need to try them on relatively smaller scales. It's obviously you're not going out right away, but it is something. Oh, thank you so much. You heard my coughing into the microphone here. Taking that and experimenting. Now, we never want to waste an exercise. Every exercise, to be honest with you, should have an experimentation component to it, because you got a whole bunch of people together doing something to practice their readiness. Let's experiment on a little bit of something going forward, understanding that often sometimes commanders are really much more focused on wanting to make sure that they're ready. We prod a little bit to make sure that there's a little bit of experimentation. That's part of that. But it also is working with industry, and it's seeing what is out there and having a capacity to try things. What we're missing often is that ecosystem, the framework through which we can easily engage with industry, because we don't know what we want. Sometimes we need to hear what we want. We can think of the operational circumstances and situations that we believe we're going to encounter, and then we see and hear what industry is producing and what research is telling us about in the future. And so for us to take that, to turn it into a capacity to experiment is much more maybe the policy side of creating the environment and the ecosystem that allows us to have this type of relationship.
So I think we have a room full of experimenters here, and a room full of experimenters that I know would actually love to work with the armed forces on experimenting with some of those technologies if they believe it could help the armed forces guarantee the security of the country. Most people in the room are representing either a research team or a smaller business, and historically small businesses have had a very difficult time interacting with the government of Canada, and including the Department of Defense. What can we do as a community here that would help us increase the quality and character of that interaction, particularly for the smaller businesses that tend to be driving these very innovative advances in robotics and autonomous systems?
So I think it is creating the relationships, number one, of investing from a military perspective, more people into the force development side of things. There's quite a focus often on the operational capability piece moving forward, and the force development piece is sometimes a much smaller community. It is smaller by size, simply because, but a smaller career focus at the same time.
To translate, can I say operational is shorter term and force development is a little bit longer term?
Force development is longer term for sure, and it's one of the reasons why we know that we actually need to bring industry in early in what we're doing. So there's a number of ways in which we do it currently. You know, we have these Canadian Armed Forces outlooks in which the Army, Navy, the Air Force, cyber and space all sort of talk about what it is they think for the future, but in my mind that's too late. That it's important and it's good, but it's too late. There also has to be engagement in the, I would say from the opposite side, where we aren't afraid to have industry come to us. There's been a very, I would say historic concern about, not wanting to be seen to be in conflict of interest perspectives, and so I won't talk to you until I think I know exactly what I want, at which point in time, excuse me, at which point in time it's, I've locked myself into a particular viewpoint potentially, or even a solution set that really is not what I should be thinking about. And so certainly in the conversations around the Defense Industrial Agency, or that we have moving forward, there's an objective that they've been giving about bringing industry in earlier into this, but that's in the 100 million and above category on the procurement side of it. Are they going to also be empowered and enabled to work in the smaller scale environment? And I think that will be absolutely critical for engagement with this community.
Just to set the baseline, I'm sure most people in the room are aware, but perhaps not everybody, the defense budget, if Canada moves from this, what was previously 1.7% to 2% to 3.5% to 5%, we're talking about the Department of Defense budget going from 30 billion to 80 billion over the next couple of years. And I think everyone I talk to in uniform is thinking, wow, after 30 years of darkness, maybe we'll have a little bit of money to do something. But I also hear them talking about how do we maintain the connection to citizens of Canada to justify their continued support for the armed forces. And I think everyone that I've talked to in uniform understands there need to be economic benefits to the country in order to justify that continued level of support. And so you talked a little bit about the new Defense Investment Agency targeted at larger systems, which obviously the military needs. On the smaller level, when we're talking about more of the people in this room that are at the research frontier, turning that research into startups and small companies, we've seen the US and more recently the British adopt models like In-Q-Tel, not so recent actually. The Americans have been doing that for 25 years. And that is a purpose-built vehicle to interact with the most innovative startup companies. We've seen the British 7 years ago create their National Security Strategic Investment Fund, which combines this venture capital plus rapid contracting vehicle. What could we do in Canada that might duplicate or engage in that same way?
Yeah, so I would say look at those models and see how does that apply from a Canadian context moving forward. You know, I want to applaud. There is a program, most of you may be aware of it, the IDEAS program, which is sponsored by DRDC, which has sandboxes, that has competitions, it has contests. But as I think maybe it was Eric this morning, I'm not sure, at the first panel sort of said, and then you hit a roadblock and there's nowhere to go. There's no immediate contracting vehicle. There's no fast way to move into procurement after there's been demonstrations and it said, yeah, I really need to go forward. It's almost as though you're back to square zero again in moving forward. And for small companies in particular, it's not able to sustain that moving forward. The other piece of this, excuse me, I think is also around the fact that Canada's military on its own cannot sustain the defense industrial base that we want to have. We have to be able to be having the industrial base in Canada being a supplier of choice, a vendor of choice, a prime of choice, a sub of choice for our allies. Going forward as well. And so we need collectively to be more supportive and engaged in making that happen. You know, we have unlike other militaries even, for example, the Canadian military has been very reluctant to speak on behalf of industry products. We say that's what we've procured, but we're not shelling for any particular company. Well, if it's a really good product and we like it, why would the military actually not speak to allies about flaws and advantages, risks and reward that they see with particular pieces moving forward?
Absolutely, great point. And there was a question on the earlier panel. Indeed, to that point, can Canada produce these things? You know, why can't we sell to the rest of the world? I think you pointed out the answer as vice chief and reporting to the chief. You're not interested in buying something Canadian if it's worse.
Absolutely not. Driving everything that the defense has to do in the next little while is that we can't just have a defense industrial policy, a defense industrial strategy that says everything you buy will be Canadian, because we will not achieve what we need, because there's a temporal aspect to how quickly we need certain capabilities and how quickly they would be available. But there needs to be a strategy, because it needs to be a long-term vision of where we want to go. So even if I'm buying this product now, where am I building the industrial capacity in Canada, either for sustainment now and potentially expansion further on, or for something that is actually good right now, and I would love to take it right now, and I would love to roll with it in advance. One of the things that you'll have heard talked about, this is much more of a systemic sort of issue potentially, is around capital money versus O&M money, so operations and maintenance money and capital money. The money that we use every day to sustain equipment, to buy weapons, because weapons are disposable, so they it's not a capital investment, is a certain type of money. And money that we get for actual equipment procurement is a different type of money. It goes through different votes. It has different approval functions within government. We need to be able to quickly use operational money, have more of it, and certainly the government did give the military increased money for some of their operations and maintenance in the short term. But a lot of this work that we want to do that's innovative, that's trialing, that's demonstrating, isn't maybe necessarily the capital money until we decide that we want to scale. And when you think of something like drone technologies in which you need to change and adapt and move forward and tweak frequently, we call this continuous capability sustainment. It's money that just needs to continuously be put into products to keep them at that leading edge, to ensure that you're not going to be subjected to defeat mechanisms from your adversaries. We actually have to reframe the way that we're thinking around and it's incredibly boring, the structure and the policy that allows the actual work that we want done in engaging with industry and in producing capabilities.
So with due respect to the hard work being done by program teams at Ideas and Innovative Solutions Canada, as a venture investor, with the privilege of investing in some people in the companies that some people in the room are building, we, meaning myself and those entrepreneurs working day and night, have made proposals to the Government of Canada in different programs, and maybe 1 or 2 years later, gotten a kind of a reply, by which time, and I'll use a concrete example because they're not in the room, Xanadu Quantum Computing. I am an investor in Xanadu Quantum Computing. We worked very hard to generate a project with a piece of the Government of Canada, the National Lab, that could use one of their technology components. It took about 2 years to get that project scoped and issued and finally funded, by which time the company told me, the only reason we're going to do this is, Duncan, because we think we like you and it might help you in the future, because at this point in time, it's now irrelevant to us. And I think I've heard, and again, I have friends in the audience here who have also been rejected by different government procurement processes because they haven't had enough runway or enough financial runway. Everyone here knows what that means, enough financial lifetime in their company. You only have 12 months of money. And the answer is, well, if you give me that procurement contract, I'll have 20. And then I'll be headed like a rocket ship where we all want to go. And your answer is, not your answer, the Government of Canada's answer is, we can't fund that because you're not stable as a company. So I'm picking up on your speed thing, which the forces I hear from everyone in uniform want speed. The entrepreneurs want speed. We're sort of hamstrung by our own process, Sargasso Sea. What can we do there?
Well, to be honest with you, the answer, part of it is more money. Because we've been caught in this paradigm of, you've got this much money, you must get capability. So you must be absolutely certain what you're getting is going to suit the bill and be exactly what you need, as opposed to, and that value is important because the operational delivery is important. Mm-hmm. What we're failing to do is see the value in learning, mm-hmm. the value in development, because there's no, if this doesn't work, I'm screwed, I've lost all my money, I can't do anymore, as opposed to having a pathway that is about this development and success, or development and not success, and then a fast way to move that into the big buckets of money that we're holding to the side.
The difference between operational capability and force development. If you have no money, you try and band-aid the operational piece. If you have more money, you can probably do a better job on the operational piece, and you have capacity to look at the force development.
Well, sometimes a lot of our money is only focused on the force development. Mm-hmm. And not the operational piece. It's a question of how do we bleed money into the operational piece that let us try things, see that they're right, and then decide that that's the move that we're going to make into the big capital procurement. And I see the computer screen here for us. Thanks so much.
Did that say -3 minutes?
It did, it did.
And Lieutenant General Allen, it's I mean the organizers and me have put us. They know how to control the speech of a venture capitalist and a former Vice Chief of Defense Staff by making sure lunch immediately follows us. So thank you, everybody. We'll both be here. Hit us up in the lobby. I hope it's been useful. Lieutenant General Allen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.